Welcome to a brand new perspective. It's the monthly mother-daughter download you don't want to miss.
Welcome to a brand new perspective. I'm your co-host, Linda Bethay.
And I'm your other co-host, Finley.
And today we're super excited to welcome Doug Zarkin.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So Doug is a 2026 Adweek Marketing Vanguard honoree, a TEDx speaker, and a best-selling author, so a multi-hyphenate in many ways. Over the course of his career, he's helped build and grow some of the world's most recognizable consumer brands. Some of your favorites, Finn, like Victoria's Secret Pink, Pearl Vision, and most recently, Take 5 Oil Change. He's also the author of Moving Your Brand Out of the Friend Zone and the creator of the Thinking Human philosophy, which we will dive into. So lots of exciting stuff to cover today. But let's start with this Thinking Human philosophy, because Doug, you recently gave a TEDx talk, which is super impressive. And you talked about the gap between what we experience as a customer and how we want to be treated by a business. And you call that gap thinking human. So can you explain a little bit about this philosophy and how it came to be?
First of all, it's great to be with you guys. And I think as we talk about today's landscape, Linda, you and I remember a day when, there were 5 channels to choose what we were going to watch on TV. And if we wanted to research something, we actually had to go to the library. And so, Finley, what's interesting is that because you have so many choices and options at your disposal, companies have to work harder to earn your trust. And the notion of thinking human is really a philosophy that you build a business with the idea of treating every customer, whether they're coming to your website, whether they're coming to your store, whether they're coming to your Instagram shop, as if they are the only customer that's going to shop you that day. And so think about that. Think about the last time you walked into a retail store and nobody paid attention to you, or you walked into a restaurant and you had a bad waiter experience. Thinking human is about thinking of every person who crosses that threshold as if they're the only one that's going to do business. And that frees you up to think about creating such an amazing ecosystem, an amazing experience that really values the person, the human, not just the dollar sign of the receipt or whatever it's going to be in the register.
It's interesting. You talked about when we were growing up, we had limited options, both in terms of our choices, but also what we could do if we had a bad experience. I mean, Finley and I were talking on the last podcast about Consumer Reports. Do you remember Consumer Reports?
Yeah, sure. The circles.
She was shocked. She was like, what do you mean you didn't have Google or an iPhone to do this stuff? And I was like, no, we had a book that you would read to do your research. But if you had a bad experience, you couldn't go to social media. Maybe you could call an 800 number, but your options were really limited. So I do think we're operating in a very different era right now where consumer and customer experience matters more.
It matters more. There's a much greater outlet for your voice to be heard. The challenge is that, especially in social, it tends to be on the polarities. It's either the really, really good experience or the really, really bad experience. And we know as much as society today is pulling us in the directions of being on the, plus or minus, it's really the middle. And that's really where you learn about what your brand is. And that's why it's so important that regardless of what business you're in, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's e-com, whether it's service or product, that you don't live your brand behind the stupid computer screen, that you actually get to the front lines. If you're in an e-com business, work customer service. If you're a brick and mortar, work in the retail. That's why I love to freak out my daughter that I'm one of the few dads that knows how to sell a lip gloss, knows how to fit a bra, is a licensed optician, knows how to change oil. And it's because the only way that I can learn about a business is actually to experience it, not only as a customer, but as an employee.
Particularly for us now in our careers as leaders, we don't often get that experience. And so I love that you've taken it upon yourself at each company you've worked at to get that hands-on experience on the front line with the customer or consumer.
It's more important to do that than almost anything else. At Take 5, for example, I required every member of the marketing team to spend 1 day a quarter working under the hood, literally, and getting dirty. And you learn so much of the nuances about what works and what doesn't from listening to your frontline associates.
So Finley, you're working as a sales associate in retail this summer.
Yes.
Do you feel like your company's done a great job of enabling you on the front line to bring the brand to life in a consistent, memorable way?
I think so. I remember my very first day on the job, the first thing that we talked about in my training was being a greeter. In retail, we do stuff called zoning. So we'll have a person stationed in the front and a person stationed in the back. We'll have certain roles and we kind of rotate throughout the day. But the greeter is the most important role. It's the first thing a customer experiences when you walk in. You want to make sure you're warm. You want to make sure you're welcoming, talking to everybody. So we definitely focus a lot on that.
The 5-second rule is not about dropping something on the floor and eating it. It's that moment that somebody crosses the threshold to when they're embraced. And I think it's fabulous they're focusing on that because it does mean something.
Setting the tone from the beginning, whether you are working in consumer products or service, matters. That first impression is going to have a lasting impact, and it moves something from a transaction to a memorable experience. And Doug, something that stuck with me from your TEDx talk was when you talked about employees at Ritz-Carlton, which is an amazing brand, and how they're empowered to handle consumer issues on their own up to $2,000. Like, that's remarkable.
It is the way that you turn an employee into an ambassador is you empower them to, in the moment, make something right. I had the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with the Ritz-Carlton leadership group, really understanding their philosophy of customer service as I was helping to rebuild Pearl Vision into a quality of care, doctor quality driven brand. And the approach was about how you think about your employees. In today's world, so much of it's scripted. And I think AI can be the worst thing to happen to customer service because all it does is it makes scripting easier versus actually listening. The customer isn't always right. Sometimes the customer is just an ass. Finley, I'm sure you see that at retail all the time. Sometimes the customer is just a jerk. But if you lead with empathy, if you lead with the recognition that, you know what, something's going wrong, let me understand it so I can solve it, you can take the tension down and probably arrive at a solution that makes you happy, makes them happy, and creates just a better experience for everybody.
That's the definition of thinking human. At the end of the day, you have humans on both sides of the interaction or the experience, and being able to approach it from a human standpoint will likely result in a win-win. And Finley, I know you've had a lot of experiences this summer dealing with jerks. So do you feel like you were empowered to think human and solve those customer service issues?
I wouldn't say the customers are jerks. I would say, like, I've definitely had some experiences. I had one the other day. I got yelled at over the phone, but she had a very good reason to be frustrated and upset. It's definitely drilled into us that we put customer happiness over all else. So even with our return policy, if the customer is over by a few days, a lot of times we will still allow the return to process solely because we don't want a bad review. We want to keep a good relationship with our customers and we want people to keep coming back to our store. So we try and prioritize the customer happiness.
You have general policies and guardrails, but you're empowered to assess the individual situation.
Yes.
And try to drive optimal customer happiness.
Yes, definitely. Especially my manager. She gives general guidelines, but she does really trust all of us as a team to either work together or individually figure out what the problem is, how we can best fix the problem and make it work for the company and the customer.
First of all, that's awesome that it's not rigid because there's nothing worse. Something will very rarely break during the warranty period. It's usually like right after. But the fact that you have the flexibility to like think human, to actually do the right thing is incredibly important. I also think it's such a good lesson for you. I have a son your age, my daughter's slightly older, and I'm learning more and more about how so much of retail is judgment. They assess you when you walk in the door. You know, you could be buying a $750 pocketbook and then your mom goes in and buys the same pocketbook. They're going to treat her differently than you. And that's kind of ridiculous because at the end of the day, your credit card works just like hers. And more in this economy, let's call it the 16 to 24 is an audience that you may not look at to make your business whole. But if you don't attract them then when they hit 25 and above, forget it. They're going to remember and not come back.
And they may not have the buying power today, but they have the social capital. They're the ones that are on social media, and they're the ones that are posting or streaming a bad experience. And so that's something I think in customer service nowadays you also have to consider. It's not just about the one-time purchase or the repeat purchase. It's about the experience and the sentiment that that creates.
Where I work, we do especially a good job. The person who's my store manager at my location is the youngest store manager in our company, but also just in general, a very young age for a store manager in the retail experience. And I think part of the reason that they put her there is because she can understand more about the customer experience coming from somebody who shops at a lot of these places herself, but also from a standpoint of how people react on social media. Even though she might not be the typical age for it or have as much experience, she brings a different skill set.
There used to be this expression, like buys from like. People naturally gravitate to people who look like them, who are of the same generation. And more now, it's more of a mindset than an age set. You know, if you find an amazing customer service person in retail, it doesn't matter whether they're 16 or 60. The bottom line is you feel taken care of, you feel prioritized, you feel valued, and that's where you go back, and that's the person that you go back to.
So we're talking a lot about that human element in customer service. But Doug, you also touched on AI. And I think customer service is an area where AI has made a ton of inroads. I mean, think about how often if you call a company, you don't actually talk to a human. You go through an automated menu. Or if you're on a website and you have a chat with a bot or an agent. AI has definitely taken over customer service. And so curious as to your perspective, Doug, is that counter to the thinking human philosophy?
I may or may not have thrown a cell phone against the wall once or twice when trying to get through one of those automated representative, hit zero things. I appreciate the value that AI can bring in terms of scenario planning. The challenge that I find right now is that when there's a problem, you want to talk to a real person. You want to talk to a real human being. Number one, the technology is not perfect. Fine. But more importantly, the subtext, the gray area, doesn't exist in AI. AI is only as good as the questions that you ask and the data that you put into it. But you know better than anybody, Linda, data doesn't make decisions for people like us. We make decisions using data because data is only as good as the questions that you ask. And so for customer service, it can give you a trend. It could give you an idea of what's going on. It could help you with anchor points. But I think push come to shove, you got a problem, you want to talk to a real live person.
I've also thrown the phone at the wall more than a few times because at the end of the day, those AI agents are following a script. And if you have an issue that's not scripted, they're not going to be able to solve your problem. And so, while I think AI can absolutely play a critical role up to a point, in today's day and age where technology is still evolving, you should be able to choose whether or not you want to go through an agent, but you should also have the option of a live person. And I found more and more companies are defaulting to AI only. You actually can't reach a live human, and that impacts my choice of what companies I want to deal with.
You know, the intention is great in terms of using AI for customer service, which is to allow the customer to be handled quickly, promptly, professionally. Where it falls short is that it doesn't allow them to be handled humanely. I would rather wait on hold for 5 minutes to talk to a live person who can then handle the problem in 5 minutes than to be connected immediately to a robot where if I don't say things this slowly or if I don't articulate it perfectly because I'm angry, they will, so you want this? No, I don't want this. That makes it almost worse.
Yes. And then you get rerouted back to the beginning of the menu and you have to go through the whole process over again. And as somebody who's very impatient and values my time, I can't handle that. Another thing you said in the TEDx talk that really hit home was you said that it's not really customer service. It's not a service, but it's the place where brands apologize.
Yes.
And in my last role, I was actually managing our customer service organization. And we had a number of issues where we had a lot of internal conversations on the pros and cons of issuing that public apology. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier with the rise of social media and people posting videos that can go viral. We had a product issue. Somebody posted a video and within 24 hours, it had 8 million views.
Yeah.
And so as the brand steward and as the person responsible for customer service, you want to make that right. But what does it mean to make it right today?
I think that's where it gets into the idea of empathy. Okay. Because there is nothing better than turning an adversary into an advocate. And one of the things that I coach when customer service is part of my responsibilities is, first of all, take it offline. pick up the phone, have a conversation. The second thing is complete the circle. If we have done right by the customer, ask the customer to post with the same degree of energy the fact that we've reached out, that we've solved the problem. Even if you don't agree with our solution, at least acknowledge that we've leaned in, because going from an adversary to an advocate, when you see brands that all they have is 5s on Google Star Score, something's fishy. Because even the Ritz-Carlton will mess up. The realities of business is that you're not always going to get it right, but it's not about getting it right. It's about treating people right. And I think, Finley, your example, if I came into wherever you're working and I had a receipt and it was a week past the deadline, I can't help it that it broke a week later, or maybe I was just slow on the uptake and never got to the store. The fact that you guys are willing to look at the situation, even if you went in and you saw my purchase history and made the decision, I'd respect that as well. That's such a great lesson, because why live in the world of black and white when you can live in the world of gray? Because you're going to now create a customer for life. You're now going to have somebody who's going to say, you know what? I was out of warranty, but I met this really great salesperson and she took care of me. And you know what? You should go and meet with her. You should go and shop with her. And the most valuable marketing tool is word of mouth. And word of mouth, the reputation you have, it's reputation commerce more than anything. What you say about brands matters more than what I say about the brand.
You had an experience recently, Finley, where somebody tried to return something outside of the return policy, but you were empowered to think human and handle that correctly.
Yes, it was definitely more difficult because it wasn't just a week outside of it. She had purchased the item in November, so it had been quite a few months past the date, so there wasn't much I could do on my end. So I told her, I'm so sorry about this. I understand your frustrations. Let me give you the contact of our customer service person, and you can reach out to them so they can get you in contact with our warehouse or wherever the item needs to be returned to. Because we couldn't accept the return in store just because it had been so long, but we don't want to send them away with nothing.
Yeah.
So we give them access to our customer service.
When I talk about the notion of thinking human, it's not ethereal, but it does come with risk, because someone will always try to game the system. And I think especially as that customer vents online, I think brands have to have resourcing to be able to defend themselves. And that's where you get into a dynamic that nobody likes to talk about, which is firing your customer. And it's not an exciting thing or a positive thing, but there will be times where a brand will say to a customer, thank you, please don't come again.
Finley, I'm sure you've had multiple customers this summer. You would have liked to say that too.
Definitely felt it, but we always say, thank you so much for stopping in. Have a great rest of your day. Hope to see you soon.
Doug, I love what you said about when you are able to salvage that relationship, when you don't have to fire the customer, closing the loop and having them close the loop for you and post positively about their experience. Because I think a lot of brands will do the right thing, but it ends there.
I couldn't agree more with the importance of closing loop. I think, unfortunately, social has become this one-way vomit machine where customers can just vent and say whatever the hell they want, right, wrong, or indifferent. And then we've got to figure out how to pick up the pieces. And if you're not paying attention to it, what they're training you, Finley, to realize is that the reputation of the store is as important as whatever the store sells. And that's so true about brands. The reputation of the brand is equally, if not more important than what it actually delivers. Because at the end of the day, and I talk about this in my book, whether you're making $50,000, $500,000, or $5 million, everybody wants brand value. And brand value is the experience that you get divided by the price that you pay. So you would never pay $50 for a hamburger at McDonald's, but you'd probably pay $20 for a hamburger at a really fine steakhouse. And the reason why is because I love McDonald's, but a steakhouse is a better quality meal and it's got the linens and the waiters and it's a different environment versus eating a hamburger in your car. That experience is what we remember. We buy experiences. The products and services feed into that. And I think it's great that in your summer job, you're learning the importance of the experience.
We actually talked about the experience economy on a recent podcast. And I think experiences in a post-COVID world and a world where people have so many choices matters more than ever. And I think especially for Gen Z that are seeking out more real life experiences. They're consciously choosing to get off their digital devices and have experiences. So I think, Finley, you have an interesting perspective because you see it from the business side of things and trying to create the experience for your customers, but you also yourself as a Gen Z consumer want valuable, memorable experiences. So for you, what makes a great experience?
I can say, coming from both a shopper and a worker, the thing that has always made the difference to me is when I'm able to connect to the sales associate on some sort of personal level. If I go into a shop and maybe we bond over wearing the same necklace, it could be something as tiny as that. I think then I am more inclined to buy something, which is great for the store, but I also just leave with a more positive experience. The other day, I had a customer come in. We started talking and found out that we had a lot of the same interests. She ended up asking for my advice and ended up buying 3 things. Would she have bought those 3 things if we hadn't ended up talking? I don't know. But she left there with a smile on her face, which she wouldn't have had if I didn't connect with her.
And that harkens back to something, Doug, that you had said around people don't stay loyal to what they notice, but to what makes them feel something. Finley, you made her feel something. She had a true experience, not just a transaction.
Yes.
And you became, by proxy, the brand. You became the 3-dimensional embodiment of the brand. And the question that we all struggle with as marketers and brand leaders is, how do we capture that? And how do we give the consumer a sense of what they can expect? Because one of the most critical things in a human behavior is that consumers make emotional decisions before they make rational choices. If I'm going back to somewhere, I'm going to make a decision with my heart and then rationalize it in my head. And especially as you get into more expensive purchases, the EQ part of it is so important. You got to feel good. You know, when you go to the Ritz-Carlton, you're not thinking that the room is $500. You're thinking that, wow, how do they know my name? I've been here for 5 minutes. And that's awesome that they brought a cold towel to my chair and that my chair's got a comfortable pillow and, you know, a towel on it.
Do you think the category or the caliber of the spend matters? Because like the Ritz-Carlton, you're on vacation usually. That's a great experience. You're shopping with your friends or you're shopping for an event. That's something fun. But you were the CMO at Take 5. An oil change is viewed as a chore by most people. So how do you think about turning a chore into a memorable experience?
It's a great question. I don't think it has everything to do with how much you're spending. I think it has to do with recognizing the mindset of the consumer. And so with the campaign that I led the development of this year, it was the human insight that when the oil light went off, it was just one more damn thing that somebody had to do. And so it was less about the oil change and it was more about the understanding that, you know what, I don't have to stress out about it. You know, I can get it taken care of and I don't have to leave my car and I can get it done quickly. I think a great example of where it's not about the money, it's about the effort. And this is a story I talk about in the book, is that when my wife and I were living in the city with my daughter, kids come with stuff. Finley, you won't remember, but when, you know, your parents would take you out, you had a lot of stuff, especially when you went out for like breakfast or lunch. And we would go to this neighborhood diner on the Upper West Side. And I remember there were 3 of us and they would sit us at a table for 4. And I finally said to the hostess, why do you always sit us at the bigger table? And she's like, because I just want you to be comfortable. Because you got the car seat and you got the placemats and the toys versus jamming us at what most people did is they jammed you at a table for 2. And so it's a small moment like that that is really the difference, I think, between creating an amazing experience and creating just an experience.
I think it goes back to the insight, right? You talk about the insight when the oil change light goes on, or the insight behind what new parents are dealing with. And I think all great marketing starts with great insights and understanding the human tension or the human need, which then just goes back to your think human philosophy.
It's mindset. The interesting thing about doing what you and I do for a living is you have to have the bravado to believe that you are capable of motivating the consumer to do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. I mean, that is the objective of marketing. You have to pair that with the humility of understanding that to do that, you really have to get into the mindset of your customer. And that requires you to be really good at asking questions. It requires you to be really, really curious. And I think most importantly, it requires you to make the decision that's best for them, not what's best for you as the marketer. What's best for them is what's going to drive the business. It's not about what you want or what I want. It's about what that customer really needs. And the only way you can tap into that need is by asking great questions and being a really good listener.
You mentioned mindset, and we talk a lot on this podcast about the Gen Z mindset and marketing to Gen Z. And so I'm fascinated about your experience at Victoria's Secret on the Pink brand, because that's a brand that's gone through a lot of ups and downs, but recently is definitely connecting with that Gen Z audience through a Gen Z mindset. So I'm curious how you approached that during your time there.
When I was there, it was prior to the Me Too movement. It was very much about what we called the wheel of sexy. And the insight that we had was there was supermodel sexy, which was all of the angels and the master brand. But the insight that we brought was that Victoria's Secret Pink was what we would call real sexy. It was that little bit. It wasn't over the top. It was just that feeling of positivity. And I think back then that was really breakthrough, because when I worked on that business, it was still very much all about the angels. And it was very much this unattainable view of what body type and sexy was. Real sexy is that inspiration, not aspiration. Real sexy is empowering everybody to feel great about themselves. And I think that's what they're doing a really good job of now. Not just the aspiration, but also the inspiration. Balancing it out with the realities that is an anomaly, I think has become more and more important. I think also it's becoming more and more accepted to realize that unattainability is unattainability. You can still enjoy it, but it's just, you're never going to look like that, and that's okay.
I think Victoria's Secret's a fascinating case study because the brand stood for outdated ideas of femininity and sex and all of those things. And so, yes, they tried to rehab the brand image, but I think what they did really smartly was launch a separate brand, Pink, that could stand for something else as they tried to evolve the company to meet more modern ideals and lean more into empowerment and inclusivity. And I think under their new CEO, they've chosen to focus more on Pink versus the flagship brand. And I know they're doing a lot of product launches, innovation, collabs now, leaning into comfort, leaning into size, inclusivity, which is very different than the Victoria's Secret brand I grew up with the angels. And so, Finley, I'm curious what your generation thinks about Pink.
You know, I own stuff from both. When I think of both of them, I don't think of them together. Like, I know that they're sister brands. Like, I know it is Victoria's Secret Pink, but I think of it as two separate things. Pink to me has always felt softer in a way, not in terms of like the fabrics or anything, just in terms of like the brand itself and the community of the brand. It's, like you've said, more working towards the inclusivity and the everyday versus this Adriana Lima supermodel standard of Victoria's Secret. And I think a lot of my friends do own stuff from both, but would agree that the vibes of the brands are very different.
I'll tell you, one of the things I'm really proud of when I was at Victoria's Secret, I wanted to move away from aggressively leveraging the angels and actually did an entertainment product placement deal with people like Jessica Simpson when she was married to Nick Lachey on Newlyweds, and got Pink on the show. And we did a whole bunch of celebrity seating back when it was a lot harder to do because it wasn't pay for play. Like, you actually had to network and build the relationships. We worked really hard to get that brand on a little bit more of an inspirational body type and an inspirational look than the aspirational of an Adriana Lima. And I remember that was a very big debate. Could we, should we? And we did it, and it worked because we were trying to bring in a younger consumer.
I think a lot of brands that are facing a turnaround situation or a brand image crisis look to celebrities, influencers, or collabs to borrow brand equity and move the brand in the direction they want to go versus doing all the heavy lifting themselves. It's interesting that you started that so many years ago. And now, as they try even harder to lean into Gen Z, they're launching a number of collabs with other Gen Z brands. So I saw for back to school, they have a Love Shack Fancy collaboration, and they're launching a limited edition backpack collection with JanSport. So two very different brands, but I thought those were really interesting collabs.
I definitely think them doing a collab specifically for the backpack speaks to their idea of trying to move away from the unattainable supermodel idea to just a typical everyday. People use backpacks every day, any people of all ages, kids who go to school, adults who need to commute to work. everybody uses some form of a bag or a backpack. And so I think that really does stay within their realm of the new idea of not this unattainable goal, but a more realistic, this is every day.
I remember one of the strategic pillars in our 5-year plan for Pink was a partnerships platform. And one of the really exciting partnerships that we had sketched out that they ended up executing after I left was the college partnerships. We actually did Victoria's Secret Pink apparel for colleges, so co-branded. And that was a way to really signal to the universe, like this was a product for you. A lot of what you're seeing now in the collabs, like the Swatch AP collab, which I think is genius, is that you're able to bring in that infusion and make a declaration of who do you really do it for?
It's interesting. You started that playbook back then, and now Lululemon has all the college athletic collabs, right? So it's evolved over time, but it's still the same marketing playbook.
We were very serious when we were accelerating that business on trying to be authentic. And again, this was, a land before time, but we recognized that you can't try to take a pencil and market it like a pen. It's different. And there are nuances to it. And I think, again, one of the things that Finley, you're blessed with and also cursed with is that the choices and options are endless, but the speed to market is even faster. It used to be something had to be designed, developed, researched, quality tested, put in a market before it went to market. The beauty of today's world is that if somebody has an idea, it could go from idea to execution in record time. And that's why shopping doom scrolling on Instagram is a death sentence, because people have an idea, they could put up a shop and it's not quality tested, and more often than not, it's crap. But you can get something out pretty quick.
Finley spends hours shopping doom scrolling. She's very familiar with that activity.
What's the one purchase, Finley, that you've made on Instagram, if you can share, that you realized after you did it, oh, this is not going to be good?
I haven't purchased something off Instagram. I've purchased stuff off of TikTok Shop, which I love. Definitely haven't made the best purchases off of there.
This is why she works to earn her own money to fund
That's right.
purchases.
Yes, I know. I ordered a pair of earrings once, super excited, looked super cute online. And so I buy them. And then I start thinking, hey, I paid $5 for these. Do these even exist? Am I going to actually get something in the mail? And I did receive them in the mail. The quality sucks, but I figured that out once I realized it's like, okay, I did pay $5 for it. I am going to get what I pay for.
You get what you pay for. Back to that brand value equation, right? It was not a good experience, but knowing you, I guarantee you did not take to social media to trash the brand or the company. You chalked it up to a life lesson.
I don't think I've ever left a bad review of something.
Yeah, I know you. That's not in your nature, but I do think for a lot of people, they have a bad experience and they immediately want to feel better by trashing the company. I don't know at the end of the day if that does make them feel better, but as a brand person who has had brands trashed on social media, that is definitely something that you have to manage and you have to protect your reputation.
And that goes back full circle to the idea of like, if I could pick up the phone and call you, Linda, and be like, listen, I bought one of your products. I opened it up. It was half empty. You showing empathy. It could be I'm really sorry. That's it. It could be, let me send you a coupon for a replacement. Let me send you a replacement. And then my post online is, oh my God, I called X, Y, and Z and this is what happened, but this is what they did.
And I think the best brands do that, right? Which is the one-on-one personal human relationship, but then take it one step further. I think about a brand like North Face. I think it was a year or two ago where they had somebody have a bad experience with one of the rain jackets, and then they delivered a new one to that person on top of a mountain. Something like that obviously is a little stunty and goes viral, but there's also a tiny brand I just read about. I'd never even heard of this brand, and they were getting crucified on TikTok for one of their bags. It was called the Weekender bag, and consumers were posting videos that was too bulky, it was too heavy, it was too hard to use. And so they could have just apologized, right? Use customer service for a brand to apologize, but instead the founder actually went live and read all the negative comments on camera and said, hey, we hear you and we're going to fix this. She listened to the criticism and she basically redesigned the bag and did it in a great fun marketing way. They called it facelift. It had a glow up and people responded to that. And it ultimately turned a bad experience into a great experience that then got positive social media feedback.
I think one of the greatest examples of empathy for your customer is in the world of football. There was a professional football team from a city that has had a notorious, it's not New York, that's had a notorious bad track record in drafting quarterbacks. And they offered
New York.
it could apply to New York. They offered their fans the opportunity to bring in one of their quarterback jerseys from one of the quarterbacks that they've either cut or traded and traded in for another jersey of a current team member. And if you're loyal to a sports team, you're going to go out and you're going to buy the number one draft pick jersey every single year, especially if you've got kids that are sports fans. But imagine what that says to the customer, that you can bring that jersey back. And I don't remember if it was get a full credit. I don't remember what it was, but it was something about a trade-in program. And I was like, that is so incredibly smart.
It reminds me almost of Patagonia, which has that lifetime guarantee. You can own a Patagonia jacket for 50 years and turn it in for a new one if it rips or breaks or whatnot. So way longer than a 1 week or a 1 month long return policy that we talked about earlier. But that engenders that loyalty, makes a memorable experience because you're thinking about the human who's purchasing and engaging with your brand. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. We are so appreciative of you being our first ever guest on a brand new
Thank you
perspective.
for having me.
And if you've watched any of our episodes, you know we end every episode with a rapid fire cool or cringe segment that Finley thinks is very cringy, but people love it. So we're going to do it. And since it is the middle of summer, we thought we'd do a summer vacation, cool or cringe. So I'm going to name something and each of you tell me whether or not you think it's cool or cringe for summer vacation. Number 1, going camping.
Cringe.
I'd say the same.
Finley doesn't like bugs.
No.
I'm not at vermin pestilence. No, thank you.
All right. Going to the beach.
Cool.
Checking the UV forecast before you go to the beach.
Cringe.
I will say cringe, but I will do it. I still do it.
This fascination with the UV forecast among teenage girls is mind-boggling.
At our age, you bring SPF 50 regardless.
I've got SPF 70. I've got a hat. I'm under an umbrella. Anything.
And you're indoors right now.
Yes.
I will check the UV. It's a bit embarrassing, but I'll still do it.
So wearing sunscreen, cool or cringe?
Cool.
Thank you.
I want good skin when I'm older, so.
All right. Designer sunglasses.
You can't ask me that question.
Cool. Depends on the
cool.
brand, but cool.
Yeah. There's a huge difference. I mean, it's all about the lenses. You do get what you pay for.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find a good pair of sunglasses at the drugstore, but UV protection, the SPF factor on a pair of sunglasses actually does change depending on the quality.
My issue is I lose sunglasses like you wouldn't believe. I've got 1 million sunglasses at the bottom of the ocean, so I will not spend the money on that. Birkenstock sandals.
Cool.
Cringe.
Oh.
It's a generational divide because I'm with you, Doug. I think they're like hippie sandals, but this generation loves them.
My son wears them. My daughter wears them. No, thank you.
They're so awesome. I've gone through, I think, 3 pairs. I have 2 currently, and one of my pairs is on its last legs. Could use some super glue to get some of the parts back together, and I still wear them. They're my favorite thing ever.
Do you wear them with socks or no?
Sometimes. I wear them with socks in the winter, but not during the summer. I wear my Birkenstocks in the snow, in the rain. I will wear them anywhere and everywhere. I love my Birkenstocks.
Very funny.
All right. So generational divide on Birkenstocks. What about Crocs?
Cringe.
Cool. I like my Crocs. I don't wear them as often as my Birkenstocks, but I do like them.
It's like, I don't know. It's like wearing a plastic cup on your foot. Give me an ordinary pair of flip-flops.
That's going to be my next one. Rubber flip-flops. Cool.
Just a plain pair of like $7 flip-flops. Fine.
Cringe.
Cool.
You know what's cool? Rainbows. That's the brand that everybody loves for the flip-flops. The ones that have like the little like braided part. I don't own a pair, but
they take too long to break in. Again, I'm impatient.
I don't know. I've heard that, but I don't know. I've heard they're worth it.
Let me ask you a question. Shorts in the winter.
Cringe. I get cold easily.
Cool. I get hot easily. I will wear shorts until I literally can't anymore.
I am amazed when I drop my son off at high school in like December. It's hooded sweatshirt and shorts.
I was going to say winter coat, cool or cringe. I know the answer.
I mean, for our job, it's cool. For you guys, it's something you have to carry and put in your locker. It's cringe. Right?
Yeah. I don't think I've worn a winter jacket to school once. Maybe when I've walked to school, but besides that, no. I don't wear my jacket to school.
My daughter's a sophomore in college, and when we moved her in freshman year, she called us like January and said, I need a winter coat. Oh, okay.
All of a sudden, it's cool.
All of a sudden,
Yep.
it's cold.
Comfort is cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again, Doug. This was fantastic.
I appreciate being the first guest. The only thing I'll say to you is that you have no place to go but up. So I wish you guys all the best. I think it's wonderful you're doing this. The perspective is fantastic. And I think we, Linda, people like you and I can learn a lot from your daughter and your daughter's generation, and keeps us honest and really keeps us grounded in what it does mean to do great work.
She teaches me something every day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Brand New Perspective.